Part 29. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 292. Wearing a black robe, he moved automatically in the wind, showing his arrogance wherever the blade pointed. For one person to be the enemy of the entire alien world, in the eyes of everyone, it is simply a manta seeking death. But when they saw Su Tong standing in front of him holding two blades, many strangers showed fear and even took 2 steps back involuntarily. Without him, just because Zhao Guangshen's name is so impressive. In the world of martial arts, when junior disciples report their family status, they always add the sentence "who is their master" in front of them. When everyone hears this, they think, "Oh, so you are the disciple of so and so." This is not only a statement of origin and identity, but also an invisible sign. For example, if you say that you are the great-great-grandson of De Dao Wangwu, no one cares who you are, but as soon as you hear De Dao Wangwu, you will immediately know who you are. Even after several generations, everyone will look at you with admiration. The purpose of showing up the sign is to leverage the strength of the master's sect, so the juniors who are traveling in the world are not strong and have little reputation. This is a textbook appearance plan. Once the strength and reputation have been established, this will no longer be needed. The Zhao Guangshen in front of him was like this. There was a big explosion at the freight station, killing so many strangers. No one knew that this kid was a desperate man who really didn't care about his life when he played. Immediately afterwards, the ghost market risked offending everyone in the world and burned the sky lantern, causing chaos in the ghost market. This guy actually invited 2 great gods, the 7th master and the 8th master, to control the market. He also ignored the rules and established his own church in the hinterland of the Central Plains. No matter how crazy the word is, it is not false at all when it is hung on his head. Furthermore, looking at the charred corpse on the ground, who can say that he doesn't have crazy capital? This guy is risking his life. It would be a lie to say that no one among these strangers is afraid. However, when I saw that many seniors were present, and even Master Li 11 was here, the timidity in my heart immediately disappeared. "I'll kill you." Han Zhonglong stepped forward with a stick. Although he had dodged Su Tong's fatal blow, he actually lost half of the move. How could he, with his arrogant nature, get past it like this? He must find it again. Place. Unexpectedly, Su Tong glanced at him and sneered contemptuously, "You are not worthy." After saying that, he looked for something in the crowd. It wasn't until he saw Jing Shaocheng in the corner that he said, "With you, it's almost the same." When everyone heard the words and looked around, they saw Jing Shaocheng standing in the most inconspicuous place. After being called out by Su Tong in public, Jing Shaocheng frowned slightly, but he seemed not to respond to Su Tong. After all, his target was not him, but Jing Shaocheng looked at the gate of Shangqing Palace, and what was inside was his ultimate goal. Everyone looked at Jingshao City with a bit of expectation in their eyes. After all, no one knew how strong this young man was. They only knew that the other party once knocked back an old senior with a motionless palm. From then on, there was no one else. Record of taking action. However, Li 11 once told Qian Shao privately that the strength of this young junior was no less than that of the top masters, and might even be stronger. "Why, I asked you two to come together, why don't you dare to come?" Su Tong continued to provoke, "It seems that you are just trash." Hearing Su Tong's provocative voice, everyone raised their brows, looking forward to a fight between the dragon and the tiger. However, what disappointed them was that in the face of Su Tong's provocation, Jing Shaocheng seemed to be blind and ignored him at all. After a moment, he smiled calmly and said, "Why do I need to kill you? Brother Long is enough for me, that's it." Although these words were said beautifully, they could not help but attract a burst of boos from the aliens, and some young aliens who had never seen Jingshao City even whispered, "I thought this guy had some tricks up his sleeve." He didn't dare to take action even if he was provoked like this. I'm afraid he's not a fool. That's not true. If you are really capable, you should make a name for yourself now and step on Zhao Guangshen's head to move forward. There is no reason to retreat. People in the world compete for fame and fortune, fighting for their lives, earning fame, and grabbing profits. How can anyone shrink back when they encounter an opportunity to stand out? In their eyes, this is a great opportunity. If they, the younger generation, hadn't thought about their own lack of strength and didn't dare to rush forward rashly, they would have been eager to rush forward and compete. Even if they failed to kill Zhao Guangshen, as long as you work under him for 10 or so rounds, you can gain a reputation in the world. At least when talking about people in the future, everyone knows that there is such a person who once fought against the notorious Zhao Guangshen and escaped unscathed. Naturally, everyone's discussions could not escape the eyes and ears of Jing Shaocheng, but he turned a deaf ear to them and did not care about them at all. He looked at Su Tong with half-smiling eyes, as if he had seen through his performance. Old fox. Su Tong saw that Jing Shaocheng was not fooled at all. He glanced back at the Shangqing Palace from the corner of his eye and frowned for a moment. This guy was far more calm than himself. This guy came to the script world out of the ordinary, and his purpose was to get the so-called fairy treasure. As for other tasks, he doesn't care at all. With this kind of character, anyone who encounters him will feel like a tiger trying to eat a tortoise. Now I can only hope that Gao Zhou can protect his master, and that the corpses he has recently made can be put to use. At this point, he has no way out. He can only take one step at a time. Even if he kills hard, he must lead his master to fight a bloody way out. Longer, let's fight quickly. We still have plenty of time, but it's not worth wasting on him. Qian Shu said and was about to walk out, as if he wanted to personally solve the stumbling block in front of him with Han Zhonglong. With his move, many seniors could not help but secretly curse this old ghost Qinzhu, how shameless he was. But Qinzhu doesn't care so much. Having lived to this age, he already has a deep understanding of the 4 words winner is king. Why should he be embarrassed? If you want to lose face, go home and feed yourself. What kind of gangsters are you doing? Just when Qian Shu was about to move forward, a hand slowly pressed on his shoulder. When he turned around, he found that it was Li 11. I'll do it. The 5 short words, each word clear and clear, echoed in everyone's ears like pearls falling to the ground, and now everyone was surprised. Even Qian Shu himself was shocked. Using his identity to attack Su Tong had already raised Su Tong to a higher level. If Su Tong survives this disaster and survives, I am afraid that no one in the world will recognize him from now on. But now it was Li 11 who took action in person, and even Jing Shaocheng couldn't help but look sideways at the exchanges with a look of surprise in his eyes. This. Qinzhu hesitated for a few seconds, then opened his mouth to try to persuade him again. But Li 11 just waved his hand. It doesn't matter, after losing for so long, it's time to give everyone a morale boost. As he spoke, he walked slowly towards Su Tong. No, to be precise, he walked step by step towards the line left by Shuigui on the ground. Headmaster. Looking at the figure who came out, Daya's hair stood up all over her body. She screamed and stamped her feet anxiously. Looking up, she saw a chaotic light above Li 11's head, as if a tiger falling from the sky let out a deafening roar. The sound is like swallowing up the whole world. Partial official Black Tiger. Daya felt embarrassed. As a great fairy, of course she knew that this was a rare destiny. The so-called partial official, 2 yangs are in conflict with each other, and 2 yins are in conflict with each other. Because they are of the same nature, such as the Ren Shui life, Wu Earth is the sign of the 7 kills, and the Black Tiger is in charge, and the evil spirit is in the sky. Once this life pattern appears, it is destined to bring trouble to the world. Fate is difficult to say, but it is extremely important. As for the fate of Black Tiger swallowing the moon, if you are in the 7 kills, you will be born with a traitorous bone in the back of your head. Just like this piece of leather on Su Tong's body, it belongs to someone who has not been raised well enough. Often people with this kind of fate will never live past the age of 20. They will either die of accidents or die prematurely. Even if they are seen by capable people and strangers, they may be killed with just a raise of their hands. But it was such a coincidence that Li 11 was extremely lucky. He was born in a farmer's family and met a Taoist priest from Mission. The Taoists saw Li 11's destiny and wanted to kill him, but Li 11 was honest. Give him a bowl of water. At this time, the Taoist felt compassion, and simply used a secret method to cover up Li 11's destiny, and took Mission with him for training. Little did he know that this would lay the foundation for a great disaster, and even set the stage for a fatal disaster for the Taoist priest in the future. Time flies, so many years have passed in the blink of an eye, and the young Black Tiger has grown old and mature, walking towards Su Tong with exactly the same steps as Li 11. He glanced at the line in front of his feet, which was only a foot away, and finally a sinister smile appeared on his lips. "Master, run quickly." Da Ya was screaming frantically, but Su Tong had no intention of retreating. Seeing Li 11 taking steps toward the line in front of him, he frowned, raised the large knife in his hand, and struck at it. "That's not how knives are used. You should go back and learn from your wife for a few more years." "Oh, no, you can't go back today." Li 11 looked at the attacking blade and finally slowly raised his palm in full view of everyone. As soon as he raised his hand, he didn't see any movement. Su Tong's body suddenly burst with blood. In a flash, Li 11 had appeared in front of him. With a flash in front of Su Tong's eyes, he decisively gave up the double swords, and turned into a pair of tiger claws clasped on his hands. He leaned forward, which was exactly the move in the close fighting technique, a close-fitting quick strike. Li 11 put his hands behind his back, flying leisurely, tiptoeing a little, and tilting his body back as if ignoring gravity. Su Tong's offensive continued unabated, and the demonic power in his hands was activated again, with dark blue firelight flashing in his palms. Li 11's face moved, and between his eyebrows he seemed to see the figure of Huo Wuji, who had only been there in Su Tong. His body couldn't help but froze, and his chest was grabbed by Su Tong's lightning-like body. "Careful!" Seeing this scene, everyone's eyelids jumped wildly, knowing that Zhao Guangshen's evil fire was extremely domineering, and they were afraid that Li 11 would suffer if he was careless. But the strange thing is that Li 11 had no intention of fighting back. He let Su Tong grab it with his big hand and shouted. The corrosive fire was also activated. Two dark-type strange fires exploded at the same time. He only needed to move forward. Once loose, Li 11 can turn into a torch. But in the subtlest way, he suddenly saw a sarcastic smile flashing in Li 11's eyes in front of him. It is just like the expression of a confident hunter looking at the prey that has fallen into his trap. It's a scam. Su Tong was shocked and immediately realized that he felt weightless in his hands. What he caught was just a phantom. "Young man, being too angry is harmful to your health," a faint teasing voice came from behind his ears. It fell freely under the moonlight, and it was extremely clear. The large black coat and the bright light blended together, but it gave people a strange apocalyptic illusion, as if there was a vast black snow falling in the sky. Is falling continuously. But Li 11's body was standing behind Su Tong at this time. A finger seemed to penetrate time. When he stretched out his hand and poked it, a bloody hole suddenly burst out in Su Tong's chest. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 293. Puff. Blood gushed out from his chest, and pain spread like a spider web along his chest. Li Ziran stood there, and the moonlight became his spotlight. His indifferent eyes sparkled with a spirit of indifference to all living things, as if he were a god on an altar, coldly watching the world, life and death for hundreds of years. That kind of aura that was like a human being and a god made everyone tremble, penetrating into people's bones. This kind of powerful aura cannot be developed overnight. Maybe you can be in a high and powerful position, maybe you have a fortune, or you may be an extremely talented person, but what do you mean in the face of time? Li 11 looked at Su Tong. He had seen too many geniuses like him in his life. Some of them could be named, some could not be named, and some had long been forgotten by him. So what if they were the most outstanding heroes of the Dharma-ending age like Ryu Shumingqing or Shuigui? In his long 100 years, he had seen more masters who mastered the mystical gate. For example, Fu Anning, the former supervisor of the Qintian prison, was the supervisor of the Qintian prison. Although the official status of the fifth-rank official was not large, it was still at least a department-level cadre now. Oh, it's still at the Beijing official level, so you can imagine how many secrets it has. In the end, such a person can only abandon his family and children and flee overseas alone to survive. Li 11 played the role of a cold observer from beginning to end, watching the rise and fall of dynasties and the change of times. Only through such long years and adventures can he develop such an aura of indifference to the world. Grand Master! Someone in the crowd finally shouted. It was still the same place and the same voice, but the mood it brought to many strangers was completely opposite. If Shuigui's Grand Master call was like a basin of cold water poured on everyone's heads, it completely extinguished the fire in everyone's heart. Then Li 11's appearance was nothing short of a stimulant, making everyone's blood boil. Su Tong clutched his chest. The injury was very serious. For an ordinary person, just one finger could kill him. But he has a dark physique, and after taking the Lingru blood revitalizing pill, he gained two special bonuses, warmth and nourishment, and blood as strong as a furnace. The wound actually healed quickly. Seeing this, Li 11 raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at Su Tong up and down again, and then shook his head. Go now, I will spare your life. What a coincidence, that's what I wanted to say too. Su Tong puffed out his chest and raised his hands fiercely, which was the master's unique move, Shankao. In an instant, the world in front of Li 11 turned grey, and wisps of dark air flashed around him. When these air flows gathered together, it seemed as if they were tearing a gap to hell out of thin air in nothingness. Li 11 looked into the gap in surprise. When he saw the sneaky shadows vaguely emerging among the overlapping buildings, he said "Oh" with interest on his cold face. It was just an "Oh," because Su Tong's mountain buckle only tore a crack, and it was almost painless to him. I'm so envious that I can understand the mystery between reality and reality at such a young age. Li 11's voice was very soft, but there was a murderous aura in every word. As soon as the words changed, his voice seemed to have cooled down rapidly like an ice cellar. But I'm afraid your master has never told you that this trick of yours must not be used. Let's do it with someone who has better life skills than you. As soon as he finished speaking, a black tiger suddenly appeared above Li 11's head. The black tiger's huge body was as huge as a mountain. With a sharp claw, the void in front of him exploded instantly. Immediately afterwards, Li 11 flicked his fingers, and an invisible force actually caused the surrounding branches to float. With a hook, the branches were like flying swords, speeding through the void, silently in the night like 8 vicious snakes, surrounding them. It circled down and swallowed Su Tong. The mountain buckle was broken, and Su Tong felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His head felt as if he had been hit by something, and before he could understand what was going on, it was like a violent storm hitting him like raindrops. Pa! 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 The beating sound was fast and urgent. Even though it was just a branch, with the blessing of Li 11's special power, he pulled it down with a stick, causing his blood and flesh to splatter and his skin torn open. Object-bending magic. Everyone was shocked. It is said that the art of controlling objects originated in the prosperous Tang dynasty. It is said that it has the ability to control objects from a distance. By the time it was passed down to the Republic of China, the true inheritance was gone and only the superficial knowledge was left. Later, I heard that there was a great thief in the Northwest. He relied on his ability to control objects and was able to succeed many times. At first he robbed the rich and gave to the poor, but later he simply became a robber. It was not until he was caught by an expert from the government that his head was chopped off, and the art of controlling objects was lost. Unexpectedly, he would reappear in Li 11's hands today. Li 11 moved as he pleased, just like a hunter driving away prey that had fallen into a trap. It was no longer just hunting, but teasing like a cat catching a mouse. Blood splashed in the air, the branches were stained red with blood, and there were even flesh hanging on them. The pain of scraping skin and bones made Su Tong's body a bloody mess in an instant. Everyone present was frightened when they saw this. Isn't this worse than Ling Chi? Li 11's strength is really extraordinary. The 8 tree sections flew halfway, suddenly collided with each other, changed directions, and completed a terrifying encirclement from left to right, top to bottom. It was really unavoidable. Impossible to guard against. A violent attack suddenly fell on Su Tong's body, causing a bloody wound on Su Tong's body. But from beginning to end, everyone always felt that something was wrong, that something was missing. What's missing? Everyone was confused, but at this moment, Li 11 suddenly waved his hand, and the 8 branches suddenly changed direction. The fragile branches suddenly erupted with murderous intent, like arrows piercing Su Tong's body. Ah! When this scream finally came out of Su Tong's mouth, everyone felt at ease. Yes, this scream was what was missing. You are so resistant, I thought you were mute. Hearing the belated scream, Li 11's expression softened a little, and it was obvious that the scream also made him feel more at ease. Su Tong raised his head. There was no good spot on his face, but he was still smiling. His smile was extremely ferocious on his face covered with blood. Fortunately, it was much quieter than when you entered the palace to be a eunuch. Little one's eyes, have you found that thing of yours? It's not still in your arms. Li 11's pupils tightened. Su Tong's words undoubtedly hit his weak spot hard. After he betrayed the mission sect, he was hunted all the way. In the end, there was really no place to run, so he gritted his teeth and simply chose to enter the palace and become a eunuch. Even if the mission sect had great abilities, they would not dare to break into the palace and kill people. Only then gave him a chance to escape. This matter has always been painful in his heart. After all, even if he has unparalleled power, he cannot change his identity as an eunuch. This matter was exposed by Su Tong in public. Li 11 looked at the crowd sideways and saw many people talking in low voices. Qian Shu immediately scolded Su Tong, "You dare to throw dirty water when death is imminent." However, his defense was obviously a bit weak. After all, it was something that the beggar could find out. I believe many people present had vaguely heard similar news. It's just that no one has evidence, and no one dares to offend Li 11. Hey, don't believe me. You want him to take off his pants and show everyone how the surgery went. Oh, I'm familiar with this. How about I give you another set of microplastic surgery? The craftsmanship is definitely better than the ones in the palace. Su Tong looked at Li 11's crotch. Although his face was covered in blood, the look in his eyes was intriguing. Li 11's face remained as usual, but there was anger in his eyes. After all, no one could stand being scolded by someone poking scars. Although elephants can ignore the provocation of ants, the problem is that Li 11 is not an elephant, and Su Tong is not an ant. Immediately, the figure flashed, and the person had arrived in front of Su Tong. When he raised his hand, thunder appeared in his palm. The secret method of mission sect, thunder in his palm. Looking at the lightning that fell, Su Tong's eyes flashed, and he raised his hand to grab it. Court death. Seeing Su Tong dare to catch Li 11's palm thunder, Qianshu couldn't help laughing and shouting, "That is the authentic thunder method of mission." It is said that it can compete with the Zhenyang thunder of Longhu Mountain, but ordinary people dare to fight head-on. This is not seeking death. Sure enough, before Su Tong's palm touched Li 11's hand, wisps of silver lightning had already torn his flesh apart. He had a dark constitution. Facing a power like lightning, the damage would naturally be doubled. But Su Tong didn't care. He looked directly at Li 11 and silently recited 3 words, "The Dark Lord." The 3 words that seemed to have infinite magic power made Li 11's expression change drastically. In his eyes, Su Tong looked like an ant that could be easily crushed to death. But at this moment, the ant suddenly turned into a deadly poisonous snake. The dark red magic flame was in his palm, and the terrifying high temperature instantly shocked Li 11. He quickly stepped back, and his figure was already more than 10 meters away. What's going on? Everyone's jaws almost dropped in shock. They never dreamed that Li 11, a Grand Master, would be forced to retreat by a rising star like Zhao Jian. Li 11 flew back with his front legs, and Su Tong followed up with his back legs. He saw that he was surrounded by thick black mist, and even his entire face was surrounded by a dull dark light, giving people a "it feels like my eyes are going dark." When the Dark Lord activates, coupled with the bonus of dark physique and the addition of corrosive fire, this moment is destined to be his most terrifying explosive power since becoming a player. Wherever he passed, billowing black mist surged, and the terrifying temperature distorted the air. "No, please help." Seeing Su Tong erupting with such terrifying power, Qianshu felt anxious and shouted for everyone to come forward. At this moment, Gao Zhou, who was hiding behind the gate of Shangqing Palace and watching the battle, saw this. His eyes turned red, and he cursed, "Bah, you old guys are shameless, I will fight with you." As he spoke, Gao Zhou was about to jump out, but as soon as he stood up, a hand suddenly reached out from behind and pressed on his shoulder. "Don't move, keep watching. Look at how big you are." Gao Zhou was also anxious. He turned his arms and was about to open the hands on his shoulders, but when he turned around, his eyes suddenly widened. I'm Wu." A generous hand covered Gao Zhou's mouth, and he saw that the old man Shuigui, who was lying on the ground, was standing behind him at some point. He covered Gao Zhou's mouth with one hand and his eyes were shining brightly. He stared at Su Tong's body, and his other hand actually held a handful of melon seeds to his mouth and started to eat them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 294. Kill. In the black fog, 2 red lights flashed, and the source of these 2 red lights was Su Tong's eyes. The 2 red lights danced like flames in his eyes. The speed and ability were completely different. What was even more terrifying was the dark red fire, which gave people the illusion that even their souls would be devoured at the first glance. There are no moves, just grabbing and dancing wildly. With the powerful destructive power of the magic flames and corrosive fires, a wave of fire will burst into the sky. It will be disabled if it touches it, and it will die if it touches it. There are no moves that can be used like this. Li 11's figure kept retreating, and even the great master had to choose to avoid his sharp edge. Li 11 was surprised at Su Tong's sudden increase in strength, but he didn't pay attention to the strange fire coming from him. What really shocked him was the blurry outline behind Su Tong. What is that? It wasn't just Li 11 who noticed something strange about Su Tong, but also Dia and Jixiang. As soon as the 2 guys raised their heads, a huge black shadow was crawling on top of Su Tong's head, as if it was pressing down on the entrance of the hall. Only the outline of the black shadow could be seen, but the lineup could not be seen clearly. At this moment, it was opening its bloody mouth, and streams of blood flowed out. He kept biting Su Tong's body, as if he was enjoying his flesh and blood. Is this a destiny? Da Ya has been enshrined in the Hu family for so many years. She has never seen any strange destiny, but the destiny of her own teacher is elusive to her. It felt like some external destiny was forcibly creeping on Su Tong's body at this moment. This powerful destiny blessing undoubtedly increased the leader's power out of thin air, but this destiny was too great to be tolerated by ordinary people. That's why there is such a state of backlash against its master. If there is an expert with supernatural powers here at this moment, he will definitely see that the black tiger behind Li 11 has begun to slack off in his work. Just like Li 11, he is lying on the ground with his ears down, although he is waving. It had sharp claws and looked extremely ferocious, but it was already squeezed back by the huge beast on the headmaster's body. Su Tong didn't know the fate that Dia saw. This was the second time he activated the Dark Lord. At the moment of transforming into the Dark Lord, Su Tong felt as if his whole body was on fire. He knew very well in his heart that this was the price for activating the Dark Lord, equivalent to an exchange of flesh and blood sacrifice. The more powerful the power, the more shocking the price it bears. The moment the Dark Lord turns on, he seems to be peeling off a layer of skin. The pain involved is difficult for outsiders to understand. In Su Tong's mind, the coquettish Mr. Yu was dancing in the sea of flowers, enjoying the taste of his own flesh and blood. Fortunately, with Ci Men refining the Lingzi Huoxiudan and the rapid recovery of the Dark Constitution, Su Tong was not worried at all whether he would die suddenly. This was what allowed him to dare to be enemies with the strange people in front of him. Kill him. Qinju and others also rushed forward. Although these strangers don't know what happened to Su Tong, they all know one thing at this moment: they must not let this guy survive. Otherwise, no one will be able to live a peaceful life in the future. Black smoke billowed around Su Tong, and wherever he passed, the ground was burned into scorched earth. Naturally, Qinju and the others did not dare to step forward easily, but they were good at hitting the target and firing cold arrows. A warlock holding a command talisman took action and wanted to cast a killing spell on Su Tong. However, as soon as he took action, he discovered that Su Tong had only broken a few hairs, and he couldn't even stop him. Did you cast the wrong spell or read the mantra wrong? The warlock was still confused, but the two old men on the side were already shouting. Like himself, the two of them launched their secret skills to kill Su Tong from a distance. The result was no reaction at all. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, and the situation suddenly became awkward. Those who know their identities are fine, but those who don't know are going to curse. What are you doing at this critical moment? But soon, more and more people found that their spells didn't work. Whether it was the killing curses or the weakening and controlling spells, they all hit Su Tong without even a wave coming out. Even Qinju, an old Voldemort with a lot of knowledge, was horrified to realize that even a first-rate master would become sluggish when he was trapped in dragon bind. However, when Su Tong fell on him, his body only paused slightly. No impact at all. Just when people were confused, an old lady holding a whisk fell to the ground with a scream. Everyone stepped forward to see that the master's wife was unconscious. Everyone was frightened now, and there were not a few cases of casting a killing curse on someone else to bite themselves to death. The mission sex head nailing technique, or the head lowering technique in Southeast Asia, all have such risks. But the premise is that the spell cast by oneself is forcibly broken by others. But in front of him, Su Tong was like a crazy lion, chasing Li 11 regardless, and did not break their spell at all. On the contrary, the spell they cast seemed to have malfunctioned. It's no wonder they find it hard to understand. Level LV4 Dark Physique reduces damage by 50% when receiving dark damage such as poison, black spells, and curses. coupled with the special blessing effect of Lingru blood revitalizing pill. Blood energy is like a furnace. It lasts for 3 hours. During this period, the eater's physical body will be full of blood and vitality, and he will be 40% immune to all kinds of magic damage. At this moment, Su Tong is in the Dark Lord state, and his physical strength has been further strengthened. The remaining 10% is just a piece of cake for him. As for the unlucky master's wife, it was none of her business. She was unlucky enough to actually try to attack Su Tong with her soul. As it happened, Su Tong got a treasure in the ghost market not long ago. Fixed space mirror. This mirror has two passive effects, calming and mirror reflection. The former reduces soul damage by 40%, and the latter will reflect 40% of soul damage. 40% of the rebound damage is not high, but the problem is that for this kind of evil spell, it is most taboo to be interrupted during the execution of the spell. Suddenly, 40% of the damage rebounded back. The master was not prepared at all, and was interrupted immediately. During the process of performing the technique, coupled with the backlash damage, the master was stunned and killed himself. Su Tong didn't notice this process at all. Sometimes luck is something that no one can predict. In today's battle, none of the strangers who came were from a decent background. They all had special skills, but they were all shady. Meeting Su Tong is like meeting your nemesis. Of course, looking at things the other way around, if all the people here today were decent people, Su Tong would probably have been beaten into ashes this time. Li 11 kept dodging in order to see clearly how many secrets Su Tong had hidden. Seeing that it was becoming more and more disadvantageous to continue to entangle with this boy, the patience in his heart was completely wiped out. That's all, let's send you on your way. With a long sigh, Su Tong immediately became alert. After Li 11 let out a long sigh, his eyes suddenly became sharp, and all the light around him seemed to be completely absorbed. The left hand appeared to have thick joints and bulging muscles, as if all the strength was poured into this arm. The right hand, on the other hand, quickly withered and became thinner at a speed visible to the naked eye. The black and slender nails shone with a cold light under the night sky, which was comparable to that of a zombie. The left hand clenches a fist. Although it seems slow and clumsy, it gives people a sense of grandeur and craftsmanship. The right hand is light and ethereal, and the 5 fingers on the hand are dancing and trembling like rain falling on a pipa. When Su Tong saw it for the first time, he subconsciously shouted, "Are you suffering from epilepsy?" He shouted these words, which almost made Li 11's nose crooked with anger. He dared to speak so fast even when he was about to die, and he was about to kill this kid immediately. However, at the same time as he took action, Su Tong finally took out his trump card, a mirror and a gourd. The mirror is a fixed empty mirror, and the gourd is a cold iron gourd. Certainly. The sky-fixing mirror was aimed at Li 11, and Li 11's energy dazzled. However, the powerful effect of the sky-fixing mirror only made his hand pause in mid-air for about a second. The skill Ding Kong, which can only be activated with 50 script points, only lasts for such a short time. This is naturally due to the huge gap between the two. But for himself, just 1 second was enough, because in this second, he had already pulled out the stopper of the cold iron gourd and pointed the mouth of the gourd at Li 11, who was very close in front of him. Blowing the wind and blowing the blade. A cold current spurted out from the gourd's mouth, like a sudden snowstorm, carrying countless ice blades and hitting Li 11. But this was not the end, but the beginning. Su Tong suddenly stretched out his hand and used the burning magic flames with the corrosive fire is also sent to the gourd mouth. Now the two evil fires were mixed together, and the fire took advantage of the wind, like a rapidly inflated balloon in the violent snowstorm, and the snowstorm turned into a fire dragon in a blink of an eye. This change caught Li 11 off guard, but he was a great master after all. Seeing the crisis, he held his arms and took a step forward without any hesitation. Amazing. For being able to do this at such a young age, you are the strongest among the younger generation in the world. Along with the sound of praise, Su Tong suddenly felt a huge pain in his chest, and saw a slender nail actually penetrated his firewall and penetrated his chest. When the firelight dissipated, Li 11 was seen unscathed in the sea of fire, with a mysterious layer of silver protecting his body. Before he could recover, he suddenly picked up his nails and threw him away, falling heavily to the ground. Humph. It's boring. If I had known earlier, it would have been better for me to do it. There was an unpleasant sound of complaining in the forest, and I saw green trees and a monk wearing cassocks hiding on a hill in Bamang and watching from a distance. This monk was not the one from Bama Temple, but the Zhaiwang of Mount Wutai. Zen Master. After listening to Shu Mingking's words, Zen Master Zhaiwang just put his hands together with a smile and said meaningfully, Amitabha. I'm afraid we will never see such a magnificent scene again from now on. Master means. Shu Mingqing frowned and was about to ask for details, but the monk touched his head and said, I am afraid of killing people next, so I will take my leave. After saying that, he jumped down the 6 or 7 meter high hillside in front of him. As soon as he landed, he said, Oops, the tree was stunned, and he quickly looked down, thinking that the bald man was twisted. My feet are broken. How is Master? I just heard Ji Wan's voice coming from the dense forest below. It doesn't matter, I don't know who is so heartless that he pooped here. Ah, sneeze. In the grave pit, Zhang San sneezed and cursed, who the hell cursed me? After that, he continued to direct everyone to dig down. Note, I was too sleepy and typed the wrong chapter name. It's all out, this cannot be modified, sorry. Sorry, I was so angry last night when I asked my little boy to finish his homework. It took me a long time to calm down, which caused me to update much later. But I agreed to add more updates, so even if I stayed up late, I would update them. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 295. Seeing Su Tong fall to the ground, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. On the side, Jing Shaoqin's expression softened slightly, and his clenched fist slowly released, with a hint of regret in his eyes. Su Tong struggled a few times and managed to get up. He let Fa Cai transform into a long stick and pressed it against his lower back before he could barely stand up straight. Taking a look at the wound on his chest, he saw a hole the size of his thumb, which was only a few centimeters away from his heart and could kill him. He relied on his dark physique and Lingzi Huoxia pill to hold on until now, but it is not an exaggeration to say that he is exhausted. If he moved even a little bit, he would feel as if the bones in his body were about to crack, as if there were countless ants clinging to his bones to eat. Headmaster, stop holding on, you can't fight him. Dia stood in front of the hall and shouted. She looked up and saw that the huge shadow behind Su Tong had begun to disappear. As long as Su Tong nodded, she could immediately use the secret technique, even at the cost of breaking two tails. And can also take Su Tong out of here quickly. Su Tong ignored Dia and stared at the silvery light on Li 11's body in front of him. The stream of light seemed real and illusory, just like the old man's mountain buckle. It was neither real nor false. No wonder his magic flame didn't even burn the corners of his clothes. I can see it. Li 11 saw that his eyes were fixed on the layer of light on her body, and she deliberately opened her hand, as if to show off her clothes, and walked around in front of Su Tong. This body-protecting streamer is one of Aoki's secret arts. I bought it for 30,000 taels of silver back then. It's a pretty good deal. In the Manchu and Qing dynasties, martial arts were banned in the early stage. Countless secrets were collected from the people and stored in the inner arsenal. Not to mention 30,000 taels, even 300,000 taels could not be bought. But it happened that in the late Manchu Qing dynasty, the court had been corrupt to the core. Faced with the guns and cannons of foreigners, it actually began to advocate martial arts for all people, and martial arts schools blossomed everywhere. Even the secret skills in the arsenal were sold publicly by the eunuchs. It's a pity that the arsenal was completely burned down by a fire, and countless unique skills in the world have disappeared since then. It's quite a pity to think about it. Even if you spend 3 million, you can't buy back your life. Su Tong's mouth was still vicious. You are so stubborn when you are about to die. Thousands of hands and others gradually gathered around Su Tong, looking at him with unkind eyes, like a pack of jackals surrounding a lone lion. Just waiting for an opportunity, they will swarm up and cut the lion into pieces. Then let's all die together, Su Tong said, very calmly. If he doesn't accept life and death, he will do it. He looked down at everyone with sharp eyes. Whoever wants to come up and try together. You still dare to show off your cruelty at the end of your powerful crossbow. Qian Shu shouted happily, but everyone present quickly retreated. There was no way. There was a big explosion at the freight station last time, but it killed many strangers. Even if you are a first-rate master, as long as you have not become a person like a grand master, you are still a mortal body, and no one will be afraid of the explosion. Garbage. Looking at the strangers retreating, Su Tong raised his middle finger to everyone, with a contemptuous smile on his face, which was so crazy that he couldn't stop himself. Give you another 10 years, no. 5 years, maybe you really have the capital to make a big noise in the world. Unfortunately, today next year will be your death anniversary. Shuigui will not be lonely on the road to hell with you as his disciple. Li 11 raised his feet and walked towards Su Tong. He did not like to do this method of erasing the genius in the cradle. On the contrary, he liked to watch the process of these geniuses reaching their peak, aging step by step, and finally turning into dust. As the saying goes, flowers bloom again and no one is young anymore. Young people sing loudly, but heroes grow late. This is much more interesting than watching a play. It's a pity that I can't see the play on the young man in front of me. Su Tong raised his arms with difficulty and clasped his hands. He knew that death was right in front of him, but his mood was surprisingly calm. He even felt that this was not bad, at least this ending was not bad. It's useless. If you really have a master, let him come to me for revenge. After Li 11 finished speaking, he stepped forward and reached up to his waist. The person appeared in an instant, and when he raised his hand, lightning flashed in his palm. Seeing the slap from Li 11, Su Tong closed his eyes and bowed forward with both hands. The moment he bowed his hands, a wave of heat suddenly came from his back and poured into his body. Fuji mentally pushed his arms forward. This inconspicuous change actually caused the void in front of me to suddenly collapse and violent winds to surge. A crack tore out of thin air. Li 11 didn't take it to heart at first. This was the second time he had seen such a scene. It was just an illusion and not enough evidence. But the next second, Li 11's expression suddenly changed. That's not right. I saw the cracks in front of me burst open, numerous pavilions rising from the ground, and the roar of thousands of troops and horses filled my ears. An iron cavalry rushed out of the abyss, with flags fluttering and thousands of horses galloping. Kill! A killing sound came, and the terrifying murderous aura enveloped Li 11's body, making him, the great master, freeze up, as if he was in a quagmire. Court death. Seeing the drastic change in the situation, Li 11 was shocked and angry inside. It was an illusion. Was this impossible? How could he have such a powerful ability without taking a step forward? But at the moment, Li 11 couldn't think too much. He lowered his palm and wanted to kill Su Tong as soon as possible. But this slap was in vain. It was clearly close at hand, but it seemed to be far away. One blow missed, and thousands of cavalry rushed down like a torrent. Li 11 showed no fear when he saw this, and a huge black tiger figure appeared out of thin air behind him. He had lived for so long, and his destiny had already been nurtured. The black tiger let out a shocking roar, and slapped it down, trying to smash all the reality in front of him. Just at this moment, someone jumped out from behind Su Tong. "It's you. Old guy, are you not poisoned?" Lee 11's eyes widened, and his heart skipped a beat. A bad premonition suddenly came to his heart. I saw Master Shuigui gently caressing Su Tong's back with his hand, his black and white eyes shining brightly. "Eunuch Lee, I have been waiting for this day for a long time. Let me send you on your way. One bow will hurt people's lives, 2 bows will invite ghosts and gods, and 3 bows will knock on the door of the king of hell." The whispers from the master's mouth reached Su Tong's ears. Su Tong's dull eyes flashed with a gleam of light, as if he had used all his strength to follow the master's other hand and bow down to Lee 11 in front of him. White paper flowers bloomed out of thin air. Tens of thousands of paper figures with blurred faces, holding white sails and mourning sticks, stood neatly in 2 rows. The sounds of suanas and gongs and drums came from among them, and a stage piled with white paper could be seen in the distance. Above, a group of paper figures in costumes sang a Henan opera beheading Wei Yan in a lively tune. Looking to the other side, I saw a paper figure on the street, holding a white sail in one hand and a copper coin in the other. The stiff body slowly dropped the coins, and the coins rolled and scattered all over the ground. The paper man fiddled with it a few times and arranged the copper coins in a row. Lee 11 once worked as a eunuch in Kintian prison. Of course, he could tell at a glance that this was a 6-line divination, but when he looked at the divination again, his face suddenly turned pale. "Shang Lu, compared with being headless, it's fierce." Lee 11's eyes flickered when he saw the hexagram, and he felt as if someone stabbed his heart with a sword, and his chest was about to explode, and he even couldn't breathe. "Kill!" The iron cavalry galloped down, sweeping down with a billowing murderous aura. Lee 11 quickly activated the protective light. However, this iron cavalry ignored his protective light and passed straight through his body. Every time he passed through an iron cavalry, the black tiger above Lee 11 let out a wail. He jumped up and tried to jump, but as soon as he jumped up, a mountain of white bones hit the black tiger's head, smashing it into a ball of black mist. Torn apart. Ah! Lee 11's eyes darkened, and he stood swaying on the spot, as if he was about to fall down at any time. He glanced at the paper figures in front of him blankly, and then looked at Shuigui, who was standing next to Su Tong. He actually smiled. His face suddenly turned ferocious when he smiled, and he no longer concealed his high-pitched voice. "What a trick, I admire it. Our family is waiting for you on Huangquan Road. Let's have a good chat then. No need to worry, Eunuch Lee is on his way." Shuigui's face was expressionless, and he raised his hand to send Lee 11 on his way. A paper flower was scratched from Lee 11's throat, and a big human head rolled to the ground. Looking at Lee 11's headless corpse, Shuigui couldn't help but sigh. The two were actually not strangers. When the Kintian eunuch issued an order for paper craftsmen from all over the world to come to Beijing, the eunuch who came to deliver the message to him was Lee 11. Later, when they were making paper in the capital, the two also met once. Although there is no intersection, meeting an old friend in this era is a kind of fate in itself, but this fate is destined to be evil. Plop! As the cold corpse fell to the ground, the whole world seemed to become quiet. In their eyes, the whole process only lasts a short second. Li 11 came to the front of Zhao Kuangsheng with a quick stride, and was about to kill this madman, but the next second, the scene changed, and it was not Zhao Jian who fell to the ground, but Li 11. This is not only an unacceptable result, but also an incomprehensible process. It is just like when you are reading a comic and a page is missing at a critical moment. The story content on the next page cannot be connected, and anyone else will be arrested. Mad. When they looked up again, Su Tong lowered his hands and collapsed. If it wasn't for Fa Cai holding him up behind him, he would have been lying down long ago. But what made everyone despair was that Zhao Guangmo fell down, and behind him stood another despairing mountain. You're not, aren't you poisoned? Seeing Shui Gaiking supporting Su Tong and slowly lying on the ground, Qian Shao and others were dumbfounded. Who is that, Cimin, where is this beast? Qian Shu seemed to realize something and turned his head to look for Cimin. As a result, after looking around, he couldn't find the boy at all. It turned out that Cimin had escaped early in the morning. Nonsense, the mission has been completed. If you don't run away quickly, why are you still here to die with you bunch of dead people? Shui Gui saw the cold iron gourd hanging around Su Tong's neck with his peripheral vision. He stretched out his hand and gently opened the stopper of the gourd. He poured it gently and a pill fell out of his hand. Before everyone could see what it was, he gave it to him casually. Put it into Su Tong's mouth. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 296. After giving Su Tong Biluo Dan, the master took out 3 yellow incense sticks from his sleeves, put 1 stick in Su Tong's mouth, and inserted 2 sticks between Su Tong's fingers. Keep an eye on it, don't let the incense burn out. The master looked back at the door and said. Gao Zhou ran out quickly after hearing this, nodded, glanced at Su Tong and couldn't help but pursed his lips. There is not a single good thing on this guy's body, but thanks to that guy Cimin's Lingzi Huoxiu Dan hold on, otherwise I would have gone to see the king of hell long ago. The master flicked his fingers, and the 3 yellow incense sticks were immediately ignited. Seeing the misty green smoke rising slowly, the master finally breathed a sigh of relief. He stood up unhurriedly and tilted his head to look at Qinzhu and the others. Everyone, it's time to settle our accounts. Once upon a time there was a mountain, a temple on the mountain, and an old monk in the temple. The sun shone on Su Tong's face, and he heard readings aloud in his ears. Su Tong opened his eyelids and took a look, but the sun almost blinded his eyes. He quickly stretched out his hands to cover his face, and it took him a while to get used to the sunlight. What is this place? Slowly I sat up and looked around. I saw clouds and mist. In front of me, there were mountains standing tall in the sea of clouds. The clouds actually gave people a golden feeling under the sunlight. He turned around and saw that there was a particularly large banyan tree behind him. On the banyan tree were 7 3- and 4-year-old dolls. These dolls had bare feet, wore belly bands, and had their hair in pigtails. They all looked extremely cute. Well, that is if you ignore their almost elephant-like size. Standing in front of 7 of them as an adult, it was like looking at a giant. Su Tong looked around and tried to summon the prop book, but was unable to summon it. He could only raise his head and look at the 7 dolls on the tree. Hey, where is this? Hey, he's awake. When the 7 dolls saw the little man waking up, they jumped down from the tree. Good guy, these are like 7 mountains on the ground, and the airflow rolled up almost made Su Tong fly away. The 7 dolls were like elephant-like dolls, squatting on the ground, looking at Su Tong with curious eyes, and said in unison, the top is poor and the blue is falling, and the bottom is Huan Quan. This is the first day of Taoism in the East. Bilashan, how are you doing? Come in. By Lushan. Su Tong scratched his head, wondering how he ended up here. Did he do too many good deeds and go to heaven after his death? Well, Su Tong quickly gave up this unrealistic idea. But then he thought about it, and his heart skipped a beat. He thought of Huan Quan Biluo Dan, and recalled it carefully. When he dropped the last bow button, he vaguely seemed to hear the master's voice in his ears. Now that he thinks about it carefully, he can't remember the details for a while. But even if he took the elixir, why would he appear in this place? In doubt, the 7 dolls continued, you are a foreign guest, tell us what the world of mortals is like. What does red dust and purple road mean? For someone who doesn't like reading, he would really be confused. Su Tong happened to study hard under the obscene power of his master, Mr. Song, and happened to know the meaning of these 4 words. It's actually really easy. The so-called red dust, the red dust is rolling, the red dust girl, the red dust hotel, wrong, wrong, sorry to do it again. The so-called world of mortals refers to the human world. The Buddha saw all kinds of dramas in the world of mortals, including joys and sorrows, separation, love, hatred, and hatred. So everyone understands Hongchen's meaning easily, but what about Zimo? This originally referred to Chang'an Avenue, but later it became a metaphor used by literati to refer to vanity and prosperity. These 7 dolls are also fun. They were born in the sky and are not ordinary people. Well, except for the children of the fairy family, no one can raise their dolls to be as big as elephants. Although it looks like a doll, it has a resounding name here, called Kixian Boy. Water has 7 virtues, and the 7 wisdoms of man can lead to success. This sentence comes from Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. The goodness of the 7 virtues boy represents 7 of the virtues. Anyway, as you can tell by their names, these 7 dolls are not bad people. If it was really a monster, Su Tong would have been put to death before he woke up just now. These 7 dolls are in the sky every day. No matter how beautiful the sky is, I am tired of looking at it. When I see Su Tong, an outsider from the human world, I have to ask him, how is it down there now, how are people living? Etc. Su Tong's eyes wandered around, and he was not in a hurry to tell them. He just looked around the 7 dolls and said, I'm hungry. Do you have anything to eat here? Let's talk about it while we eat. Easy to handle. DWA stood up kindly, turned around and jumped onto the big banyan tree behind him, picked a fruit and jumped down. He put the fruit in front of Su Tong. It was not big. It was golden and golden like the skin of a persimmon and looked like an apple. It had a sweet fragrance, but, this thing was twice as big as a pumpkin. I can't finish eating even if I'm stuffed to death. But don't worry about whether you are really hungry or pretending to be hungry if you don't eat the fruit that comes to your door. Just wipe it off a few times and try to nibble it. Kick kick kick. After one bite, it tasted better than he expected. It tasted sweet and soft, and tasted a bit like plums. While eating, we talked, anyway, talking about the world of scripts and reality. It felt like I knew it 100 years before and knew it 100 years later. The 7 dolls were stunned for a moment. I don't know how long they talked. After almost eating, Su Tong stood up, looked at the sea of clouds around him, and asked them if there was anywhere else they could go for a walk. It's a rare visit, no matter what you gain, you always have to go and see more. Airway Shan Yuan pointed to the mountain in front. If you have the courage, help us and walk along the road to the mountain. When you reach the top of the mountain, give this fruit basket to Bixia Fairy on the mountain and say we asked you to send it, and she will inevitably give you a benefit. The fruit basket in Shan Yuan's hand was as big as a cart bucket, but when Shan Yuan gave it to Su Tong, the fruit basket quickly became smaller, and finally became so small that Su Tong could lift it easily. When he opened the fruit basket, he saw that it was full of golden fruits. Seeing this, Su Tong pointed at the uneaten fruit and said, "Can this one be made smaller? I'm afraid I'll be hungry on the way, so I can take it out to satisfy my hunger. This fruit is 2 circles bigger than a large pumpkin." Su Tong can only eat a little bit, which is the same as an extra bug hole in an apple. Anyway, he has eaten it, and I believe that these 7 dolls will not eat it again. If you eat it, you might as well take it away for yourself. Ken. Lao Liushan was good at clapping it with his hand, and the fruit immediately shrank in size. Finally, it was only slightly larger than an apple. Su Tong picked it up and kicked it in his arms. He picked up the fruit basket and walked up the mountain. When the 7 brothers saw Su Tong wandering away, they felt relieved. Lao Kishan frowned and asked his eldest brother kindly, Brother, isn't this bad? What if Grandma Bixia gets angry? Oh, it's fine as long as the fruit has arrived. Why are you angry? Besides, you can't be angry with the guests. I heard that the Wufen conference is being held on Wufen Day. Why don't we go and join in the fun? As soon as the boss spoke, the other 6 brothers immediately nodded. This is a great thing to say. I saw the 7 brothers leaping up to the fruit tree behind them. The fruit tree shot up from the ground, and its thick roots entwined with each other, turning into 2 big feet. They ran away with the 7 brothers, and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The 7 of them ran away, but Su Tong didn't know that the mountain was so close to him from so far away, but he didn't know how long he had been walking, and he still hadn't reached the foot of the mountain. I thought to myself that these 7 dolls were not here to trick me. Just as I was thinking about it, I saw a young child walking from a distance carrying firewood. The child glanced at Su Tong with a look of surprise on his face, but after thinking about it, he seemed to have no intention of paying attention to him. Leaving soon. Seeing this, Su Tong hurried over to stop him and asked with a smile, "Brother, how long do I have to walk to go up that mountain?" "Up the mountain?" The kid glanced at him sideways and shook his head with a half smile. "Not far, hold up 3 fingers. 3 hours." Su Tong murmured in his heart and looked at the mountain. 3 hours was almost enough. Unexpectedly, the child curled his lips and said, 300 years. With your foot strength, I estimate that it will take you 300 years to walk to the bottom of the mountain. After another 300 years of walking, you should be able to climb up the mountain. Su Tong's eyes were stunned, and he looked back in the direction behind him, thinking, "Okay, Kishan boy, don't let me meet you next time." Seeing his bad expression, the child smiled and said, "You must have been deceived, but there is a quick way. Let me take you a shortcut." At this point, Su Tong had no choice but to nod and thank him. The little boy said there was no need to be polite and led him to change direction and walk to the west. While walking and chatting, I found out after asking, that even though he is young, he is already over 1,000 years old. To be more serious, calling him grandpa is just adding to his age. After all these years, you are still the first one to come here. The sloppy Taoist priest who came last time was hundreds of years ago, the boy said and patted his forehead. By the way, he said his name was Zhang Sanfen. Coming. Su Tong was startled. Zhang Sanfen. Yes, this old man is very bad, treacherous, and wicked. Is he very famous down there? When Su Tong heard this, he raised his brows, lowered his eyelids slightly and looked at the child again. He suddenly became alert and said with an unchanged expression on his face, "No, I have never heard of such a person." Hearing Su Tong's words, the boy started to criticize this guy named Zhang Sanfen with confidence, complaining a lot, as if this person was really guilty of a heinous crime. Su Tong stood aside and nodded repeatedly, but he became more alert in his heart. While talking, the 2 of them walked to a pool. They saw that the pool was of unknown size, shrouded in clouds and mist, with 2 suspended islands above it. A steady stream of water poured down from it, forming 2 waterfalls like silver dragons. The scenery was stunning. It's truly spectacular. Here we are, this is called Shenglian Pond. Do you see the lotus on the water? You pick one and give it to me. I will conjure a boat for you and take you to the golden summit of Bixia. Su Tong nodded, walked to the pool, and put the fruit basket aside. He glanced sideways at the pool and saw that the water was clear and transparent. In the distance, there were several lotus flowers standing in the center of the lake. The lotus flowers had not yet bloomed. Su Tong smelled a fresh fragrance. "Hurry up, we're in a hurry," the kid urged behind him. Su Tong pretended to take off his clothes, rolled his eyes, and suddenly said, "Oh, why is there a person in the water?" The kid was stunned, frowned, and said, "It's impossible." Su Tong ignored him and squatted down by the lake, as if he was pulling something hard. Seeing this, the child's expression was strange, but he couldn't resist his curiosity. He walked to Su Tong's side, stood on tiptoes and looked into the water, only to find that he had just half of his body out. Su Tong, who was lying on the ground, suddenly hooked his leg and kicked the child on the butt. "Get off you. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 297. Help me. The child was already standing on tiptoes, and his center of gravity was unstable. He gestured with his hands in midair for a long time. Seeing that he was about to maintain his center of gravity, Su Tong had already stood up. Looking at the child's plump buttocks, his eyes narrowed into a line and he raised his hands. A slap in the face. Snapped. The slap was crisp and loud, and the child was slapped directly into the water. Plop, there was a splash of water, and the child fell into the water and immediately started tossing in the water. But at this time, something strange happened. As soon as the child touched the water surface turned into frost. The cold air was rising, and Su Tong couldn't help but shudder, and soon the lower half of the child's body was frozen to the surface of the water. "Hey, I knew you had bad intentions." Su Tong straightened up and saw that the water surface turned into solid ice in the blink of an eye. He probably understood what the boy meant. Even the waterfalls on both sides were frozen. "Stand up. This water will most likely have an effect similar to that of pure water. Once it comes into contact with foreign objects, it will freeze the entire water surface." This guy probably wanted to go down and pick the lotus in the center of the lake by himself after the lake was frozen. In fact, Su Tong didn't think much about it at first, but when he talked about Zhang Sanfan, he felt something was wrong. What's wrong? There are still many descriptions of Zhang Sanfan in history, and he is even familiar. But the problem is that even though there are many records, they are all very positive characters, but his behavior may be a bit weird. For example, he often talks to himself and says things that are not here, and there are also rumors that he is slovenly and talks like an animal, etc. But it is undeniable that this founder of Wudaim Taoism, no matter how bad he is, how bad can he be? As a result, the children turned out to be heinous people. They seemed to have a deep hatred for each other, and they complained all the time. Speaking of which, the two of them met by chance, and he was not familiar with Zhang Sanfan at all, but he was recorded in the historical records of the 8 classics and had practical achievements in founding the section. When comparing the two, Su Tong felt that Zhang Sanfan was the more convincing old man. A little. Thinking about this kid again, it is most likely that he suffered from Zhang Sanfan and hated him like this. Moreover, he himself said that it happened hundreds of years ago. It is obvious that he can still hold grudges for such a long time ago. Not a good thing. Therefore, Su Tong was wary of this guy from the beginning, and now it seems that he was absolutely right. Hey, there are bad people in the fairy world too. Su Tong curled his lips, ignored the child's pleading, and stepped on the ice to the center of the lake. There were 3 lotus flowers in the lake, one had already bloomed, and the other 2 had not bloomed yet. Taking a closer look, I saw that the golden light in the lotus was dazzling, as if it was pregnant with something, and the lotus had a special fragrance. Su Tong came closer and took a sip, and immediately felt light and indescribable. Good things, take them away. Thinking of this, Su Tong reached out and picked off the blooming lotus. As for the remaining 2, he didn't touch them. After all, they hadn't bloomed yet. It was a pity to pick them. Just be a human being and don't be so greedy. As soon as the lotus came into his hand, Su Tong felt his palm sink. When he saw the lotus, it turned into a jade ruyi in his hand. Oh ho, you can even transform. This is fun. Although I don't know what it is used for, it is definitely a treasure. I walked to the edge of the pool with Ruyi and saw the little boy frozen there, unable to move his upper body. He looked at Su Tong with two pleading eyes and kept blinking. If you didn't know that this boy was very bad, and you were just passing by, you would say after seeing him, maybe he will relent. Su Tong knelt down and stared at him with a smile on his face. Tell me about you, just be bad. Why are you pretending to be a good person? You are 1,000 years old, why are you not as good as those old guys below who are more than 100 years old? I know how to play. The child blinked his eyes, feeling very aggrieved. What Su Tong said is unfair. You can live for thousands of years here, and you can live for hundreds of years in the human world. They are completely different concepts. This is a hell of a place where you won't see a single person for hundreds of years, and even 3 sentences would be too much to say. If you think about the human world, if you walk around a train station, you will encounter all kinds of scams, abductions, and thefts. If you are not careful, you may be sold before you even leave the train station. After Su Tong finished speaking, he was about to leave. The child blinked crazily when he saw that he was about to leave. What else do you have to say? Su Tong squatted down when he saw this, picked up the jade ruyi in his hand and knocked on his cold forehead. With a light knock, something strange happened. With just a light touch of ruyi, the boy's head was immediately hit. Most of the ice melted away, exposing the boy's head from the ice shell. It seems that this ruyi is more than just good looking. Help me, I'm cold. With his head exposed, the boy trembled and asked Su Tong for help. It seemed that he was indeed very cold. Su Tong shook his head. This guy had no good intentions. He might have been a farmer and a snake to save him. After all, he was a man in the sky. If this guy had any magical powers, he might not be able to defeat him. Seeing Su Tong's refusal, the boy hurriedly said, I'll take you there, don't go, I'll take you up. It only takes half an hour to reach Bixia Peak. But what if you lie to me? I'm a very timid person. I've been lied to often since I was a child. If you run away as soon as you come out, I won't be able to catch up with you. Su Tong touched his small mouth with a look that was more aggrieved than him, which made the boy curse in his heart. This guy is worse than that bad old man. But it must be strong, and few people passed by on this first day. If I were to freeze here, I might be frozen for hundreds of years. After thinking about it, the boy gritted his teeth and said, Put your hand on top of my head, and I will pledge something in your hand. Say something first, I can't see what's on your head. After Su Tongyan finished speaking, he saw that the boy turned into a white deer, with a pair of golden antlers sprouting from his head. The antlers are inlaid with precious stones and pearls, which are so beautiful. It's this pair of antlers. All my belongings are on them. Can I give this to you? Seeing that the boy didn't seem to be telling lies this time, Su Tong had a look on his face as if he believed you, and he took off the antlers without any effort. He just picked them off gently, and the pair of antlers were taken off, and in Su Tong's hands it changed into the size of a palm. Look, couldn't it have been better if you had just done this? Why go around in such a big circle? Su Tong shook his head and sighed, but he didn't know that the boy had already greeted him thousands of times in his heart, wondering why the people below were so treacherous. One is worse than the other. But he only dared to think this, but he didn't dare to say it. He begged Su Tong to save him quickly, and he was almost frozen. Su Tong casually picked up Yuruyi and knocked it around the boy. The ice melted quickly, and the boy jumped out of the water with a kick of his hind legs. Shaking the hair on his body, water splashed everywhere. Not to mention that the boy turned into his original form. He looked pretty good. There were some silver patterns on the white hair, which shone in the sun. It was a pity that there were no antlers at this time, otherwise it would look like it should look better up there. Come up, I'll fly you there, just hold on to me. The boy turned around, bent down reluctantly, and motioned for Su Tong to sit up. Su Tong wanted to walk forward, but when he turned his eyes, he didn't know what he saw. He raised his eyebrows, turned around and walked to a big tree, stretched out his hand and pulled down 2 vines. He tied a knot with the tree vine and tied it to the boy. Hey, don't say I don't believe you. The main reason is that I'm afraid of heights and I'm afraid you'll fly up later and throw me off. A burst of hot air came out of the boy's nose. Although he was unhappy, he did not refuse. After all, his baby was still in the boy's hand. After he sat on it, regardless of whether he sat firmly or not, he jumped up into the clouds. Call. The sound of wind penetrated his ears, and Su Tong felt his eyes blurred. He grasped the fruit basket with one hand and the vine with the other. He squinted and looked outside, only to see a stream of light in front of him, and he couldn't see anything clearly. Only after the boy soared into the sky, and a faint light shield formed around him to isolate the strong wind, Su Tong could sit up straight and take a look. The mountains and rivers flashed by quickly. Not long after, the Zixia peak in front of him was approaching. Very close at hand. You have this ability, why don't you pick lotus flowers yourself? Su Tong shook the jade ruyi in his hand and asked, and what is this thing? Is it very precious? There are some places where you can't fly around. You can't fly within 5 feet of that pool. As for the ruyi in your hand, it's called Bibo Golden Lotus and Jade Ruyi. It has the ability to transform into plants, but you can't take it with you. Can't you take it with you? Su Tong didn't believe it and wondered if the boy was tricking him. If he couldn't take such a treasure away, wouldn't it be a loss of blood? The objects of the immortal family are intangible and have no substance. You can hold it now because you are just a ray of soul. I saw a yellow rope behind you pulling you. I guess you still have to go back. When the time comes, this thing you can't take it away. While the two were talking, the boy gradually slowed down and said to Su Tong, we're here, it's just ahead. Su Tong looked up and saw a small Taoist temple on the top of the mountain. A woman was sitting under the Taoist tree. Su Tong he took a closer look and couldn't help but look weird. Why are these women so shameless? Hey, I wanted to add more updates today, but the keyboard is broken. I took a piece of junk that came with the computer. I almost vomited after typing a few times. There are only 2 updates today. Please give me a monthly ticket. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 298. Don't talk nonsense. That's Fairy Bixia. How can you, an ordinary person, see her true appearance? The child heard his nonsense and quickly told him to shut up. But when he looked back, he saw the woman under the tree looking towards him. His heart tightened and he was so frightened that he almost fell down from the air. He hurriedly landed on the ground and crouched on all fours. Greetings to Fairy Bixia, this person is new here and he is lying. Fairy, don't argue with him. Su Tong took a look and thought that the steer spirit was not too bad. At least he knew how to speak for himself. Jumped off his back, bowed slightly towards the woman and said, I was entrusted by someone to deliver this basket of fruits to the fairy. Please don't blame the fairy for what I said unintentionally just now. Su Tong said as he looked at the fairy with his eyes. It was rare to see a fairy, so why not take another look at him? When the kid on the side saw this, he quickly kicked him to signal him not to look around. However, the Bixia fairy in front of her was not angry with Su Tong, and the hazy look on her face gradually became clearer. This face has curved eyebrows, a pair of big, watery eyes, and a standard oriental face. It looks very good looking, but how do you look at it? Isn't this the lady at the front desk? God has no form. Whatever you think looks good, that's how I look. Fairy Bixia explained with a smile. But when Su Tong heard this, he glanced at Fairy Bixia's breasts from the corner of his eye and muttered in a low voice, "Let me tell you, you are older than her." "What?" Fairy Bixia was shocked. She was stunned for a moment after hearing this, not knowing what Su Tong was referring to. Su Tong quickly waved his hand and explained, "I said age." "Oh," Fairy Bixia nodded suspiciously, beckoned, and lifted the fruit basket in Su Tong's hand. When she took a look at the fruits inside, she couldn't help but said with a hint of displeasure, "This Kishan boy is the same, he actually let you if a customer does it for you, I won't worry about you getting lost." "No, no, I'm lucky. I met a kind-hearted person." Su Tong looked at the antlerless white deer beside him with a smile and started teasing him. However, he did not break his promise and casually returned the white deer's pair of golden antlers to him. Fairy Bixia looked on with a smile, and when she saw this, she smiled meaningfully and said, "Then you are really lucky. Although it is Bilashan here, there are always some evil elves who like to play tricks on people." Balu Boy's face turned red as he listened. Of course he knew what he was hiding from others, and how could he hide it from Fairy Bixia? He quickly nodded and bowed his head and said yes, then said goodbye to Su Tong and Fairy Bixia, and left in a hurry. After Boy Balu left, Fairy Bixia looked straight and said, "Since Boy Kishan asked you to deliver fruits, you must have promised me to thank you generously, but you came in a hurry, and I didn't prepare anything, look over there." As he spoke, he pointed to the yard behind him and saw 18 large water tanks in the yard, each with a different color. "You pick one and jump down. If there is a treasure inside, it is your chance. If there is nothing, it is your blessing. If you are unlucky, you will inevitably suffer a lot. If you are destined, you will fall straight into hell. Do you dare to try it?" Su Tong was startled. The emotional treasure was not given to him in vain. "You are a dying person. You were lured with fragrance and came with the power of elixir. Although my place is not the palace of hell, it is not a charity hall either. Whether you live or die, whether you are a blessing or a misfortune, will always depend on you. There is an explanation." Fairy Bixia explained the cause and effect clearly, and Su Tong felt relieved, thinking that it was indeed the master who gave Wan Quan Biluo pill to him. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt uncomfortable. The pill was promised to be reserved for him. He thought that it might be able to change the outcome of the master, but he didn't expect that the master had no intention of taking it and left the pill for him. Own. Before Su Tong could get sentimental, Fairy Bixia began to urge her, "You don't have much time. You don't need to think too much. The number of days has already been decided whether it will be a blessing or a disaster." When Su Tong heard this, he turned around and asked, "One more question, what is the probability that I will fall directly into hell?" Fairy Bixia's big bright eyes narrowed into slits. "I said 90%, do you believe it?" Although this was said in a half-joking tone, anyone could tell that it was not alarmist. The probability of half of it was really not that high. He looked at the 18 large water tanks, glanced at them, and suddenly a sentence popped into his head, "Choose the red one." His eyes suddenly flashed, and when he looked around, there was indeed a large red water tank standing there. In the most inconspicuous corner. Could it be? Su Tong couldn't help but think of the child named Yang Yang he met at the soup restaurant that day. He had double pupils in his eyes. When he left, he took his guide money and said it was not for free, leaving behind "Choose the red one." This sentence is meaningless and I don't know what it means. Until this moment, these words suddenly popped out of my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt that what the boy said was referring to what was right in front of me. If that were the case, it would be too scary to have double pupils. This would be even scarier than predicting the future. There was an article in my master Song Lao's Kingyun magical record, which said that eminent Buddhist monks could cultivate Buddha's eyesight. Can observe cause and effect and gain insight into the future. but compared with Chong Tong, it seems to be far behind. While thinking, he unknowingly walked to the big red water tank, lowered his head and took a look into the water tank. It was so chaotic that he couldn't see anything clearly. He glanced sideways at Bixia Fairy again, and found that the girl's face had turned into a mosaic again, as if she was deliberately guarding him and not allowed to see the change in the expression on her face. Then, now that he had come this far, Su Tong took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and without waiting for Fairy Bixia to speak, he turned over and jumped directly into the big red water tank. Huh! Seeing Su Tong suddenly jump down, Fairy Bixia was stunned. She quickly stood up and counted on her fingers in confusion. It's strange, this kid should have an absolute destiny, why did he choose this water vat? But no matter how she calculated, she couldn't figure out cause and effect. She couldn't figure it out with her eyes. Bixia Fairy also had a stubborn temper. She hurriedly walked into the room, took out a compass, turned the compass with her fingers and continued to calculate. However, the results obtained became increasingly strange. Don't forget it, you can't. Fairy Bixia frowned and continued to count. This person is dead. If you have something to do, burn the paper. Bixia continued to calculate with a grimace, but as soon as she pushed the compass to the next grid, she vaguely saw a pair of black double eyes flashing in front of her, followed by a sudden thunder falling from the Bixia sky, which had never seen dark clouds. Boom, there was a sound, lightning and thunder. The white deer boy who hadn't gone far scolded Su Tong for being too treacherous as he walked. Len Buting was so frightened by the thunder that he collapsed to the ground. When he looked back, he roared, Bixia Temple was destroyed. Of course Su Tong didn't know what happened in Bixia Temple. He was happily holding a golden incense burner while his body fell rapidly. It turned out that after I jumped into the red water tank, I discovered that there was a cave in the water tank. An incense burner hung in the air, and 2 lines of words were written in the void behind with bright golden light. The treasures in the cauldron add fuel to the fire, and the soul in the belly becomes abundant. Su Tong didn't understand what this meant, so he reached out and took off the incense cauldron. As soon as he took it off, the jade ruyi in his arm suddenly turned into a puff of green smoke and was sucked into the cauldron. Before he had time to look at it for a while, the person fell downwards. The figure fell faster and faster, and then his eyes lit up, and he saw the brightly lit L city in front of his eyes. Immediately after his waist tightened, he looked down and found that there was a yellow scarf tied around his waist, pulling him down. This couldn't help but remind him that the white deer boy seemed to have said that there was a rope behind him. The rope was pulled very fast. Su Tong only had time to see the sound of killing in front of Bamang Mountain. Master Shuigui was walking rampant among many strangers. The master held his fortune in his hand and turned it into a long sword. There are no exquisite sword moves, just one word, and blood splashes 7 feet in one step. People can't see where the sword is coming from. Master has already started. Before Su Tong could take a closer look, his vision suddenly went black, and he felt as if something was burning him on his back and palms. It was a burning pain, and his consciousness suddenly blurred. Old man, the incense is gone. Gaozhou, who was guarding Su Tong, saw 3 incense candles broken in unison. He was so anxious that cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and he shouted to his master Shuigui. Hearing this, Shuigui raised his hand and pointed his sword in front of the stranger's throat. He glanced sideways and saw 3 yellow incense sticks neatly broken. A kind smile finally appeared on his stern face. The smile on the wrinkled face became more and more kind, but with a shake of the long sword in his hand, a big head flew up, and his face was full of surprise. It seemed that he was still thinking about it at this moment. This old thief suddenly faced him. What are you laughing at? Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 299. People are afraid of 3 long and 2 short, and fragrance is afraid of two long and one short. Taoists use burning incense to test the unknown. If the 3 incense sticks burn at the same speed, it means the incense is safe. If 2 incense sticks are long and one is short, there must be an ominous sign within 7 days. 2 short incense sticks and 1 long stick are a good sign for longevity incense. Shwegui only knew what the result would be after this method was actually implemented. In fact, Shwegui did not dare to say that he was sure about it. After all, Huanquan Biluo Dan is not an ordinary thing. He searched the underworld 3 times and never found any trace of it, otherwise he would not have received this destiny. It is impossible to say that this method is risk-free, but if you cannot pass this level, your disciple will not live long. Not to mention the troubles of 5 disadvantages and 3 deficiencies, this boy's fate is not very good. I have used 6-line divination to calculate several times, and the results are without exception. This boy has a lot of obstacles and is a short-lived ghost. Now looking at the 3 yellow incense sticks that were cut into neat lengths, Shwegui knew that this kid had finally made it through this level. After passing this level, he is a person who has died once. His destiny has changed and he is no longer bound by 3 disadvantages and 5 shortcomings. To put it bluntly, this person's name can no longer be found in the book of life and death of the King of Hell. It doesn't mean that he will not die, but that he is no longer bound by his destiny. How could this make Shwegui unhappy? At the end of the day, he didn't even know how long he could live. Not only was there hope for the inheritance, but his disciples also escaped and had their fate changed. How could he be unhappy? When Master Shwegui is happy, he becomes even more unscrupulous in his actions. With cold eyes, he ignored the old guys chasing him and started to operate on the small ones first. As soon as he waved his hand, he saw leaves flying and flowers flying, and more than 10 paper figures were called out by the master, who picked up the morning stick in his hand and beat them. These paper figures are not ordinary. In the past, these paper figures were able to fight with 3 first-class masters outside the Shangqing Palace. Now they are simply chopping melons and vegetables against the juniors who are not good at learning. The morning stick in the paper man's hand fell down like a broken bamboo. There were no mysterious moves, it was just a quick word. A junior, relying on his good qinggong, jumped 3 meters high into the air with one move. He looked at the paper figures on the ground with a sneer on his lips. I didn't expect that I can fly. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a white shadow coming towards him. When he turned around, he was frightened to death. A paper man appeared lightly in front of him, and he was struck head-on with a funeral stick. In an instant, the young man's brains were spilled in the air. It's a pity that the paper man is a dead thing after all and cannot speak. Otherwise, he would have spat. Comparing lightness skills with the paper man, your brain will be caught in the door. Shwegui walked around these old guys. No matter how hard they wanted to fight him, Shwegui had no choice but not to fight with them at all, and could only watch helplessly as Shwegui killed their disciples wantonly. Shwegui, stop it, a white-haired old man was anxious. He used a cane to protect his disciple Joquan, and begged hard, even if it cost his own life. He just wanted to spare his disciple life. At least their family line cannot be cut off like this. Smash it. Seeing his son being beaten to death by 3 paper figures and random sticks, the middle-aged father cried heartbrokenly. All his merits, fame, and wealth were all reduced to nothing in an instant. At this time, even if I put the dragon throne in front of me, I still feel that life is boring. Shwegui, old man, I will fight with you. The old man's eyes were red and he wanted to rush up and die with Shwegui. Shwegui, you are not a grand master in vain, someone cried and accused, but they had forgotten who was shamelessly beating up Shwegui's disciples. Someone viciously cursed, Shwegui, after today, the descendants of your family will never survive. From now on, your 7 sects and 1 lineage will be taboo in the world, and your descendants will be the enemies of the world. It doesn't matter if he curses loudly or wails sadly. Shwegui turned a deaf ear to the pleading of a young woman in front of him, raised his hand and sent her on her way with a sword. Facing the accusations from the old guys behind him, he finally responded with one sentence: anyone who crosses the line will be killed. There was no emotion in the voice, and it was as cold as a machine, but anyone who heard these words would tremble in their hearts. Okay, okay. Shwegui, you are cruel, you want to be destined, we will play with you to the end today. When several old men saw that their disciples were killed and injured in an instant, their expressions suddenly became uglier. They tore off their shirts and exposed their chests. Gao Zhou took a closer look and was shocked when he saw the marks on these old people. I saw that these old people were carved with dense talismans. Gao Zhou did not recognize these talismans at all, but he could tell that the talismans were newly tattooed on them recently, and there were blood scabs in some places. Qinju, let's do it. Even if we are doomed, we old guys will admit it. The 5 old men had cold faces, full of resentment, and their eyes were red. Qinju hesitated for a moment. Now that the situation was over, the consequences would be if he really did this. Seeing Senju's hesitation, the 5 old men scolded him sharply. Why, you have lived for most of your life. Is it possible that you will be a coward when the time comes? We will accompany you on the road to hell. Isn't it enough? Qinju, I know what you are thinking, but since he dares to risk the world and cut off our incense, we old guys should also pave a bright road for future generations. Do it? Why? Qianshu glanced at Shwegui, who was not far away, and saw that instead of stepping forward to stop him, he looked on coldly, clearly looking at him levelly, but giving people a condescending feeling. Seeing this, Qianshu's face and muscles twitched a few times, and he gritted his teeth. Forget it, the 5 elders are so righteous, and I will wait until death. Qianshu will send you on your way. After saying that, he suddenly raised his hands and waved, only to see a scimitar flying out of his sleeves. The blade drew a cold light in the dark night and flashed between the throats of the 5 old men. Puff puff puff. Suddenly, 5 heads flew up, and blood splashed into the air. But strangely, as the heads flew up, the bodies of the 5 old men did not fall down. Instead, they stood upright with their hands on their hips. Looking again, the 5 heads were spinning in the air, and there were waves of evil curses coming out of their mouths. Thousands of hands kneaded with his fingers, the mask on his face cracked in half, he kept chanting curses, and a stream of black smoke rose from his body. Rumble, rumble. There was a muffled thunder and lightning in the sky. As the 5 heads flew up into the sky, the bodies of the 5 people shriveled up, as if all the blood had been sucked out of their bodies. Shwegui, you are blocking us today, and we have nothing to say. But once the door of yin and yang is opened, from now on, there will be countless evil ghosts and evil spirits in the world. Where will your new era be? Qianshao raised his eyes and saw a huge one-armed figure quietly emerging in mid-air. After 5 heads poured into the figure turned into a blood cloud. After a while, a rain of blood fell from the sky, covering the figure. In the entire Bamang mountain. Shwegui. From now on, the world will be in chaos. Let the descendants of your family slowly taste this cause and effect, ha ha ha. With a sharp shout, a leader of an unknown sect waved the blade of his hand and touched his throat. When the other seniors saw this, their faces were filled with crazy looks. These people suddenly took action, but instead of killing Shwegui, they committed suicide. At this time, something strange happened. This guy fell to the ground, but the blood on his body was gushing out quickly. The blood rain was getting heavier and heavier, but the rain falling on the ground did not cause water accumulation. If you look closely, you will find that the ground was actually still dry. Crazy, crazy. These old guys are crazy. Gao Zhou watched these old guys commit suicide, and he felt crazy for a moment. It was said that these people's death was not a pity, but actually watching them commit suicide one by one, Gao Zhou suddenly felt a very unpleasant feeling in his heart. Speaking of which, these people are not necessarily all treacherous and evil people. There are even many old-timers among them who have a good reputation in the world. They usually protect their hometown and accumulate bad virtues. It's just that no one expected it to come to this point. The rain of blood became heavier and heavier, turning the whole world into blood, but not a drop of blood could be seen on the ground. There was a splashing sound under Eagle Cloud Peak, and a large amount of blood was seen oozing out from the cracks in the surrounding mountains, like a river, gathering into the ravine under Yingyun Peak. For a moment, the ravine was filled with blood. If someone were standing on the peak at this time, they would definitely be able to see the eagle cloud swarming down, as if there was a blood eagle spreading its wings, as if it was about to soar into the sky. They are not crazy, they are just playing games with the sky. Su Tong didn't know when he woke up. He looked coldly at the bloody scene in front of him, but his heart was very complicated. What did you say? Gao Zhou didn't understand what he meant, so Su Tong could only explain patiently. If the master represents heaven, then the arrival of a new era is a general trend. However, under this general trend, these inheritors, who were once regarded as living gods by the world, have become the dregs of the old era. The incense was extinguished, the inheritance was cut off, and the stage was sadly lost. It was a huge gap. How could they accept such a result? So they want to rebel. Even at this time, even if it is used to fill this hole, the gate of yin and yang will still be opened and infinite evil ghosts will be released. As long as these evil spirits are causing trouble in the world, their legacy will always be rekindled, and the world will inevitably enshrine them on the altar again. Even if you fight with your life, you will win against half a son of heaven. Su Tong slowly stood up from the ground, feeling a burning pain on his back. It felt like something was burning on his back, but he couldn't care less at this time. Because at this moment, Su Tong and Gao Zhou have received a prompt from space, Main Mission 3, Eradicate the Weeds. Mission Goal, be sure to kill Thousand Hands and obtain the fairy treasure fragments in Thousand Hands' arms. The two of them took another look and found that Kinju was already heading towards Eagle Cloud Peak under the cover of those old guys. Su Tong took another look and found that Jing Xiaochen was also missing, and his brows sank. At this time, Master Shuigui also came over. There was no polite nonsense, but he just patted Su Tong on the shoulder. Go ahead. If you want to save that silly boy, it depends on your own ability. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 300. The Master's words have two meanings. The first meaning is that the fool can still be saved, and the second meaning is that Thousand Hands will harm the fool. The Master has no intention of continuing to kill. He has killed all those who should be killed. Looking sideways, there are still some people standing there blankly. The Master did not kill them. The reason is very simple. They did not cross that line. Go, I'll wait for you here. Remember that everything has its fate. The Master casually threw Fasai to Su Tong, while at the same time he quietly stuffed a cloth bag into Su Tong's hand with his other hand. Su Tong glanced at Bulletin Dai and saw his master nodding towards him with a smile. Okay, let's go right now. Su Tong actually had a lot to say to the old man in his heart, including his experience in Bixiation, but now was not the time to just call Gao Zhou and leave. After seeing the two people leave, Shuigui stepped to the edge of the line. His slightly drooped eyelids showed a bit of fatigue, and he looked at the people outside the line. Most of these people were strangers from the younger generation. They felt that they were not strong enough, so they did not participate in the process of besieging and killing Su Tong. Naturally, they did not cross the line. At this moment, looking at his master, senior brothers, and senior masters, they had turned into cold mummies one by one, with tears in their eyes. A young man in a white vest hesitated for a moment, and finally plucked up the courage to walk up to Shwegui. His face was already red from holding back blood, and he wanted to hate, but did not dare to have the thought of revenge. Just because the old man in front of him is no different from a mountain that he can't climb in his life. Not only him, but even Zhao Guangmo may be a goal that he can't even think of surpassing in his life. Full of grievances in his heart, he held back his grief and choked with sobs as he raised his hands to Shwegui in front of him and knelt down abruptly. "Get up! What are you doing?" Everyone was filled with grief when they suddenly saw this young man kneeling down towards his enemy. Their eyes widened and they wished they could go forward and eat his flesh alive. But what the young man said next made everyone's expressions soften and their expressions became more complicated. Junior, please be brave, please, Weavua, please senior, please allow me to collect the remains of master and senior brother. I dare not avenge myself. I just want master and the others to be buried in peace." The young man couldn't help but shed tears from his eyes. He suppressed his emotions about to collapse and kowtowed 3 times in front of Shwegui. When everyone saw this scene, they felt sad for a moment. Several people came forward and followed the young man to kneel in front of Shwegui, saying that as long as the bones were collected, they would never dare to mention the matter of revenge again. There were not only disciples but also relatives and descendants among them. Within a moment, most of them knelt down except for a few who were still standing there, glaring at Shwegui with red eyes. Next, as long as Shwegui nods, they can take away the corpses of their parents. It is up to them to bury, burn, or take them back to their hometown to return to their roots. However, Shwegui looked at the young strangers kneeling in front of him and just stretched out his hand to help the young man up. Then he ignored everyone's desperate expressions, shook his head numbly, and pointed to the line under his feet. "If you cross the line, you will no longer be able to live. Let's go. This arrow will have nothing to do with you." Everyone was speechless, feeling resentful, but in the end they couldn't muster the courage to rush over, because the Shwegui in front of them was not a human being at this moment, but God, a rule without emotions. He doesn't care what your purpose is when you step on this line. The moment you step on the line, that's when your head falls to the ground. Shashasha. There were rapid footsteps in the bushes, and the blood rain in the sky became heavier and heavier. Su Tong was already familiar with walking this road. Although it was dark night, the side he looked across was like daytime and he didn't feel dark at all. As I walked, I looked up at the sky through Daya's eyes. The one-armed 5-era god in the sky was blurred at this time, and a pillar of blood flashed out from her forehead and shone under Yingyun Peak. "Headmaster, she wants to use herself as a sacrifice but also to open the yin and yang dao." Daya stood in front of the entrance of the hall, staring straight at the sky, her face a little ugly for a moment. Although strictly speaking, once the yin and yang dao is completely opened, there will be countless evil spirits in the world, and they will be very interested in protecting the family immortals like them. In fact, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. After all, when people discover that there are more and more of these evil ghosts, these people who are regarded as scum by the master will be sent to the altar again. Baojiaxian can naturally get a piece of this cake, and it is a huge piece. Maybe this will break the old pattern of the northeastern immortal family not leaving seclusion. But if you can't just think from the perspective of interests, at least Daya still doesn't want to see the situation happen in her heart. After all, it is the common people who suffer in the end. Is there any way you can stop it? Su Tong was in trouble. His master asked him to come, but he didn't teach him how to turn off this thing. He just asked himself to save the fool and kill the 1,000 hands. Headmaster, what is this stove of yours used for? When it came to this matter, Daya had no idea, so she could only look around. As for the stove in her mouth, Su Tong looked back and saw a golden incense burner placed in the entrance of his hall. Isn't this the stove he was talking about? Is that the incense burner that came down? I don't know why, but this thing didn't reach his hand, but fell into the hall behind him. At this moment, Su Tong didn't know what the purpose of this thing was, and he didn't have the time to study it now. Seeing Da Ya, he had no choice but to catch up with Gao Zhou and take a look first. When the two of them climbed to Eagle Cloud Peak, they saw Thousand-Handed Man standing on the top of the peak from a distance. Qian Shu also noticed the two of them, but looked at Su Tong with a somewhat surprised expression, and sneered for a moment. Your life is really not ordinary, you are not dead. To each other, if you don't die, I will be so lonely if I go down alone. Su Tong walked up to him with a cold face, and Gao Zhou summoned two zombies, one on the left and one on the right. Humph, just the two of you? What about Shuigui, doesn't that old guy dare to come by himself? Qian Shu sneered, holding his arms. It's enough for both of us to kill you. The old man is too lazy to fight you. Although Gao Zhou had never fought against Qian Shu, he was not intimidated by him at all. Seeing this, Qinju sat directly on the ground, as if he didn't intend to resist. He just looked at the bloody light under Eagle Cloud Peak and said to himself, it's a pity. If my plan had not gone wrong, there shouldn't be the three of us on Eagle Cloud Peak at this moment. It must be a sea of people. Thousands of families are incense. After speaking, he changed his tone and laughed twice, but this is fine. When the countless evil spirits below break out of the yin and yang Dao, who in this world will dare to say that we are dregs again? Qian Shao stared at Su Tong. There's no telling when, you, this kid, will be able to become a master and rise to prominence. Then remember to thank me. Su Tong had no expression on his face when he heard this, and just stepped forward. No, I will seal your soul in your head, and then find a high place to hang it up, so that you can see clearly with your dog eyes. The dregs are dregs, because you will only use such shady means to intimidate ordinary people and achieve your goal of fooling the world. Speaking of this, Su Tong thought of the old monk from Bama Temple. Smash the Buddha of reality and get rid of the demons in your heart. Don't you understand? You are wearing the guise of eradicating evil and promoting good, and preaching so-called dogma, but what I have in mind is class and your interests, not the common people in the world. At this point, Su Tong's eyes met Qinju's eyes. You are the bugs lying on the people's bodies sucking blood. Qian Shu's face turned cold, and his facial features that had been burned by the fire were now twisted together, and he looked up to the sky and laughed. Okay, it's useless to talk more. Since you are looking for death, then let me send you on the road together. After saying that, Qian Shu had an iron plate in his hand. The iron plate looked like it was newly made. There were 3 strange charms on it, which looked a bit like a command arrow, but not much like it. No, that's because the old guy is holding the talisman of the 5 gods of Era in his hand. Da Ya was well informed, and when she saw the spell on the command talisman, her heart suddenly pounded, and she hurriedly explained it to Su Tong. It turns out that although Li 11 placed the 5 gods of disaster here and used the secret technique of mission, when making the 5 gods of disaster, in order to prevent this thing from being disobedient, Qian Shu planted a talisman in the statue early. Put up the token and ask the 5 gods of disaster for help. Please. Su Tong heard the word please used by Dia and couldn't help but asked, what kind of request is it? Could it be that you are just like you old immortals who attack people? Dia rolled her eyes, thinking that these were 2 different things, but it was not easy to dwell on such a small side issue now, so she nodded, absolutely. I saw Qian Shu holding the token and chanting incantations. The 5 evil gods behind him seemed to feel the call. A big hand slowly came down and turned into billowing black smoke and poured into Qian Shu's body. In the blink of an eye, he saw a real 5 evil gods standing behind Qinju. You take a rest first and let me test the waters. Gao Zhou said as he raised the silver needle in his hand slightly and controlled the two zombies to rush towards Jianshu. These two zombies are not ordinary zombies. They are Gao Zhou's special talents. As soon as he chanted a curse with his fingers, the two zombies immediately revealed their ferocious side. The blood vessels above and below them emerged directly from the body surface, their eyes protruded, and their shoulders were enlarged by a full circle. The surrounding meridians and muscles were twisted and looked as weird as cylinders. With a kick of both feet, it actually flew towards Kinju like a cannonball. However, just when Gao Zhou was full of confidence, he saw Jianshu raise the corner of his mouth. It's a small trick. As he spoke, the five gods behind him stretched out his two big hands, fired his bows left and right, and actually grabbed two zombies in his hands. Then, before Gao Zhou had time to react, Jianshu quickly bit his finger, drew a blood talisman in the air, and stuck it on the heads of the two zombies. The blood talisman was placed on the zombie's head, and the zombie immediately stopped moving. Jianshu sneered and looked at the surprised Gao Zhou. I'm afraid you don't know, but I have stayed in Plum Blossom Village for several years, playing with corpses. There are more than you. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 301. Where is Plum Blossom Village? Others don't know this, but Gao Zhou feels like Mingjing in his heart. Speaking of Plum Blossom Village, one must mention one person, Plum Blossom Taoist. This Taoist Plum Blossom is not the one who wrote the poem, but a stranger. The exact date of his birth in the Ming and Qing dynasties is unknown. We only know that this Taoist Plum Blossom has been famous in the circle of strangers since the paper tying business began to take off. Gain some fame. Plum Blossom Village, to put it bluntly, is Yizhuang. Plum Blossom Taoist is the owner of Yizhuang. Speaking of which, the cobbler and paper maker were all handed down from this Plum Blossom Taoist. Speaking of which, although the cobbler's job is to sew corpses, he also has the skills to exorcise corpses. In the past, the lineage of exorcising corpses in Xiangzi was all from the same family. The same goes for paper makers. The Plum Blossom Taoist has long since disappeared, but the Plum Blossom Village still remains. It is said that there is an inconspicuous plum blossom forest in Qingcheng Mountain, but most people cannot find it. It is said that there is a blind trick left by the Plum Blossom Taoist. Kinju also joined Plum Blossom Manor by chance. What he wanted to learn was the paper tying technique, but unfortunately the skill had been separated out long ago, and no one in Plum Blossom Manor knew it. Senju could only learn a lot of corpse control skills, and found some old paper-making classics in it, and learned something specious. In the end, he met the master of Saman and switched to puppetry. So speaking of it, Senju and them are also from the same origin. Haha, after studying so much, I still don't see what you are capable of. Come on, blast me. Gao Zhou pouted, seeing the corpses being charged, he immediately squeezed the seal, and the two corpses immediately began to twist and swell, and then suddenly exploded. The dark green corpse water splashed out, and stained the ground and immediately corroded into bowl-sized holes. However, the strange thing is that the thousand-handed man is not affected at all, as if there is an invisible layer in the air protecting him. What is this? Gao Zhou grinned and looked carefully, thinking that Jianshu had also learned some kind of body-protecting streamer like Li-11. Just when he was about to summon two more zombies, Su Tong stopped him. Don't bother, what is real is what is real, what is real is what is real. This old guy is a half-step master, it is useless for you to deal with him like this. Qianshao gave a thumbs up, you have good eyesight. You have only been following Shuigui for a long time and you can understand this truth. No wonder Li-11 wants to kill you personally. Su Tong has followed his master for so long, but he has never heard his master say what the so-called great master is. But the master didn't say that he already had an understanding in his heart. Especially when Li 11 attacked him, the master secretly borrowed power from him, allowing him to feel the power of the full version of Bashenko in advance. This made him understand the so-called reality and reality. There is a deeper understanding of the Tao. He thought that the so-called Grand Master should be someone who truly understands and masters the power of turning reality into reality. Only then can he be called a Grand Master. He even now doubts whether the land gods mentioned by the ancients are some great masters who live in seclusion in the mountains and forests. Naturally, the 1,000 hands in front of him did not have such power, but he should have barely reached the level of a half-step Grand Master after receiving the blessings of the 5 gods behind him. That is to say, he has mastered the power of illusion, but he has not mastered the ability to transform it into reality. Real ability. But it doesn't matter if you see it, even a half-step master is enough to kill you. He ran all the way here just to borrow the power of the 5 Aragods and give Shuigui a fight. However, Shuigui did not come, but 2 little guys came, and they just used their blood to avenge everyone. As he spoke, Qianshao sneered and opened his hands towards the 2 of them. Black mist suddenly surged, turning the entire Eagle Cloud Peak into a dark world. Headmaster, above. De Ya pointed to the sky and reminded. Su Tong and Gao Zhou looked up and saw a big hand open in the grey darkness above their heads, with hair-like lines hanging down from the palm. Colorful play 100 ghosts set the stage. As the saying goes, ghosts set up the stage, people act, ghosts watch people, the opera is scattered, and human lives perish. This is not a stage set up for the living, but a stage set up for the dying. Thousands of silver threads are hanging down, and once it touches a living person, it is like thousands of little snakes wrapping around it. Gao Zhou's face darkened, he took out the ink fountain in his hand, pulled out a long dark red rope, knitted it into a big net with his fingers, and threw it over his head. The big net was like a golden bell, firmly protecting him. Master, be careful. De Ya stood at the entrance of the hall and stamped his feet anxiously. He could naturally see that his master and Li 11 had been fighting for so long. Even though they seemed to be vigorous at this moment, they were still at the end of their game. To deal with a half-grand master at this time, it was simply impossible. It is seeking death. But Su Tong did not respond immediately. Instead, he opened his hand and threw a ball of corrosive fire towards his head. But the strange thing is that once the flame is stained with the silver thread, it mysteriously disappears. At this time, Qianshu's lazy voice came to their ears. Although I don't have the ability to understand the truth of reality, I understand the truth of reality and reality. I'm afraid Shuigui asked you 2 boys to come. The biggest mistake of his life. Qinji's voice came from unknown direction, but soon after, a sound of footsteps came in the darkness. Su Tong and Gao Zhou took a closer look and saw that the visitor was wearing a dark priest's robe, holding a golden cross in one hand and a black Bible in the other. Looking at the face of the visitor again, the skin was dark, and the face was only attached to the bones, but he had blonde hair. Foreigners. Silver-armored corpse. Su Tong and Gao Zhou couldn't help but be surprised when they saw this. When Su Tong thought about the methods of Gishikinju and others, he immediately understood. Well, I'm afraid this is the one who taught you the foreign methods. He taught his apprentices to starve their masters to death. It would be better for you to teach your apprentices to kill their masters. Su Tongpi laughed sarcastically. Wait, could it be said that the coffin below belongs to him? At this time, Gao Zhou also suddenly remembered the empty coffin under Eagle Cloud Peak. His heart moved, and he immediately understood and shouted to everyone around him, you turned him into a zombie. How can you, what a filial son, next year today, I will burn a handful of frost morn for you. It's a pity that Qinji could only understand the first part, and the last sentence made him frown. He didn't know what frost morn was. The name sounded like it was very powerful, but he always felt something was strange. He didn't talk nonsense to the two of them. On one side, he directed the zombie to kill Su Tong and Gao Zhou, while on the other side, silver threads hung down, making it difficult to tell the real thing from the fake. You deal with this thing, leave these silver threads to me. After Su Tong finished speaking to Gao Zhou, he summoned Fa Cai and held it in his hand. Fa Cai turned into a big broom in his hand, constantly breaking the silver threads in front of his eyes. Gao Zhou grinned, patted his chest and promised, "Don't worry, I'm good at dealing with zombies." As he spoke, he summoned 3 more zombies and pointed with his hand, "Come on, show this foreign devil what a serious zombie is. These silver threads are not real. No matter how much they are broken, they will be restored in the blink of an eye." But occasionally when a silver thread fell on the back of Su Tong's hand, he felt a tingling sensation like a needle. When he looked at it again, he saw that the silver thread was actually about to pierce his skin and drill into it. Seeing this, Su Tong quickly activated his demonic power and burned it with a handful of demonic flames before burning the silver wire into ashes. "Da ya, Ji Xiang, do you have any way to break it?" Seeing that this was not the way to go, Su Tong could only ask the 2 people at the entrance. Of course, he mainly asked Da Ya. After all, the white mouse Jixiang could only stand there like a mascot at this moment. "This, I can try to help you rush out, but I can't help you deal with Qinzhu. He is a half-step master. Don't say that you don't understand the techniques of my Dima family. Even the Dima who took me out of the mountain, if you take action personally, you are no match for him." Da Ya's words were nothing more than persuading Su Tong to leave as soon as possible. Besides, the yin and yang Dao fingers may have been opened now, and the world's chaos has become a foregone conclusion. It cannot be restored by one person alone. Of course, she also admitted that she had some selfish motives. After all, the leader was in charge. If Su Tong died, all her 100 years of practice would be ruined. Just as Su Tong was asking questions, Gao Zhou's scream suddenly came from behind, "Quick, get out of the way." Su Tong instinctively ducked sideways, and a fishy wind flew past him. When he looked back, he found that it was the foreign zombie. Good guy, the 3 zombies released by Gao Zhou were torn to pieces in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Su Tong couldn't help but cast a resentful look at Gao Zhou, as if to say, "Can you still be reliable? Come on, let me rush out of here first." Su Tong was also decisive and immediately agreed to Daya's proposal after hearing what Daya said. Daya's eyes glowed with green light and she shouted, "Master, please touch your feet." Su Tong followed his words, tiptoed, and immediately felt a force coming from behind. But strangely, when he leaned forward slightly, he did not lose his center of gravity. Instead, his hands and feet tightened, and he felt someone pressing against his back. Same as above. In the blink of an eye, white hair sprouted on Su Tong's face, 3 phantom tails appeared behind him, his body curved, and even his nails became sharp and slender. He opened his mouth and said in a sharp and harsh voice, "Headmaster, I will take you out first." After saying that, he knelt on the ground and rushed forward quickly. He ran a few steps and suddenly jumped up, chanting an incantation that didn't sound like human words. Others couldn't understand this spell, but Su Tong was able to understand the general meaning at the moment when Da Ya hit him. "The great god Tenger has come to this world, and I am willing to stop practicing for 100 years and pray for divine power." While talking, Daya opened her mouth and bit behind her, biting off a tail. When she threw the tail forward, the tail burst out with silver light and tore a hole in the darkness. The price is not small. A tail has been practiced for 100 years. If it were anyone else, even the one who took him out of the mountain, she would never pay such a huge sum. Su Tong didn't care about Gao Zhou at this time, and jumped out of the black curtain with a quick step. But as soon as he jumped out of the black curtain, he saw Qian Han sitting cross-legged in front of him not far away. "Headmaster, run quickly, We are no match for this old guy. Da Ya shouted loudly, and Su Tong said, okay. Okay. Okay, he took a quick step and rushed straight towards Jian Hand. Dia.